Possiamo fare un po' di exchange.
Io sono stato in Cina.
I
cinesi
lo so che
la shaker consumavo, non so se c'è dicevamo sempre a chiunque veniva in visita, portatevi.
Okay, for the news.
Looks like it's going to be really, really fun.
Okay, please have your seat.
Signorina, le biglietto lei deve subito dargliele. Vabbè, sediamoci.
Anche lì a Singapore.
Central, yeah. Because very often in Norway we call the Arctic the High North. That is because we are
The
not.
low north is
After short introduction
To
you,
I like that.
Good.
after to the lady, the
And you know,
chairman of the
from a Norwegian
we are
perspective,
the far south.
you are the far
we are
south.
we
We have
represent
even today
the
been
chief of
discussing
staff
with
of
the
the
Choi
Navy.
whether they can
And finally-
have an event in Bodø at our conference dealing with
Sì, Nini.
North seen from the
No, no, no.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. I can.
To him.
That could be very good.
Fraud Melvin.
Yes, he's from the North University.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
but I guess the GNR will also make an intervention. So
Dicevo, sì, Presidente, io dirò due parole in introduzione, poi diamo la parola all'ambasciatore,
Certo,
poi passerei la parola a lei.
va bene, io dico due parole.
Vabbè, sono già 6.
Due di questi, no?
Poi le due dell'ammiraglio saranno
anche le
8.
sì, corretto.
Yeah.
Che dice? Aspettiamo, o possiamo cominciare. Acceso? Ah, ok. Buon pomeriggio, buonasera a tutti. Good afternoon, dear excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I feel personally, but we feel at COE and all the staff of COE honored to address you today on behalf of our president, Franco Frattini, and to officially open the 4th edition of the Arctic Connections, the international symposium aimed to promote cooperation on Arctic issues. First of all, I would like to give a special thanks to the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Italy, and of course, first of all, to His Excellency, the Ambassador, the Haidt North Center for Business and Governance, North University in Bodo, that has promoted and organized this event jointly with us in COE. I'm very glad to be here today with all of you and to welcome His Excellency the Ambassador of Norway to Italy, Johan Weib, the President of the National Research Council of Italy, Professor Maria Chiara Carrozza, the Director of the Italian Hydrographic Institute, Massimiliano Nannini, and the Director of the High North Center, North University Business School, Froden Melvik. I would like also to warmly welcome the esteemed speakers and moderators and all those who will attend the panels which will follow this opening ceremony, and all the participants who accepted our invitation. Distinguished friends, speakers, esteemed guests, and all participants, Arctic is so important for us, and that's why COE decided years ago to invest, and I take this opportunity to stress the personal engagement of our President, Franco Frattini, I am humbly representing today, who decided, together with the staff of SIOI, to invest in knowledge and in training a new generation of diplomats and international experts on a key region that plays a key role in global geopolitics. As you know, SIOI has been organizing for 7 years a master course on sustainable development, geopolitics of the resources and Arctic studies. Since September 2018, SIOI is a member of the University of the Arctic. And this is one more reason for us in this house to take care of Arctic. We are particularly honored to be part of this important network, whose main goal is to keep the attention high on Arctic and to preserve it as a territory of peace, stability, and mutually beneficial cooperation. The Today Symposium will provide a unique opportunity to discuss the new challenges of the region related to the international security, geopolitics of energy and transports, the energy crisis that affects all European countries, and the development of a new leadership capable of leading to closer cooperation between Arctic and non-Arctic states, such as Italy. In this context, the Arctic, in our understanding, could play a double role, both from the point of view of security, of supply and energy transition, in which the European Union could become a new key actor. I wish you a very successful conference. It is with appreciation and with great expectation that I look forward to today's reflections all together. I'm pleased to give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Johan Weib, the co-organizer of the event. But before this, I would like, at the end of my remarks, to welcome with a great pleasure the presence of our Navy, Italian Navy, represented here by Admiral Nannini, representing the Chief of Staff, because our Navy has been engaged for many years, along with the very ancient tradition of the Italian Navy in the Arctic research and exploration. Thank you very much. Mr. Ambassador, I give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Sessa, and thank you also for this very kind introduction. And also I would like to acknowledge my partners here in the panel. And I would very much wish to salute all you, dear friends of the Arctic who are here today. I would first of all, let's thank the SIOI and President Franco Frattini. As you mentioned, he has a very special commitment for the Arctic, for hosting and organizing this highly important yearly symposium. And I would also like to thank Nord University and all our other contributors. Thank you so much. In a complex and challenging global situation, Arctic Connections is really a great platform for discussing and knowledge sharing. It also reflects the long-standing and strong cooperation between our nations on Arctic issues. I'm grateful that so many are present here today. Actually, Italy and Norway share important Arctic history together, with a highlight, of course, of Umberto Nobile and Roald Amundsen flying across the polar ice cap from Europe to America in 1926. Our Arctic cooperation has developed a lot the last 100 years. The Chianere's presence at the Norwegian Ny-Ålesund research station through the Dirigible Italia center is one example, and Italy being an observer state in the Arctic Council is another. Many may look at the Arctic as a remote and almost uninhabitable area. This perspective overlooks the region's great diversity. The Norwegian Arctic is above all a place where people live and work, where traditional Sami way of life coexists with modern society. About 10% or maybe a bit less of the Norwegian population have their home there. It is also home to some of Norway's foremost research and innovation, great natural resources, and pristine nature. However, due to its geographical position, importance, and potential, the Arctic is more than just domestic policy. It's also foreign policy and an important area for international cooperation. The title of this year's symposium is The Great Challenge of the Arctic: Perspectives and Changes for a Peaceful Cooperation. International cooperation is actually a key part of the Norwegian Arctic policy. We have been seeing increased global interest in Arctic issues for a long time. One main reason of this interest is the dramatic climate changes that happen as we speak in the region. In Svalbard, temperatures have risen 6 times faster than the world average. This has major consequences locally for biodiversity, food resources, and for people in the Arctic, but also globally. What we are experiencing now in the Arctic can tell us a lot of what we can expect in the rest of the world in the near future. Climatic and environmental challenges need extensive international research cooperation. Norway has therefore facilitated international polar research in Svalbard for more than 50 years, and we intend to further develop Svalbard as a platform for international polar research in the coming years. A mantra we Norwegians have used for many years when talking about the Arctic is high north, low tension. This is still our ambition. Over the years, we have established effective forums for multilateral cooperation in the Arctic, such as the Arctic Council and the Barents Euro-Arctic Council. We have also put in place a sound legal framework based on the law of the sea. The Arctic is a well-regulated region. However, after Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, we have moved into a new uncharted territory. Now we are required to increase our vigilance nationally and with our NATO allies. The government is therefore boosting defense capabilities and military presence in northern Norway. At the same time, we want to maintain predictability. But our best defense investment is to continue to develop northern Norway as a strong, dynamic, and highly competent region. Without people, no security. Without security, no people. We will make use of the green transition to further strengthen infrastructure and services in the region, job creation, education, and attractive cultural life, and create opportunities for young people and a sustainable future in the north. The essence is this: we need people in the Arctic, and we need to strike the right balance between protection and development to mitigate climate change and to ensure both the protection and the development of the Arctic. Energy security was mentioned by you, Ambassador Sasa, and it's on everybody's mind these days. The High North is also key in this regard. Norway is today the EU's main supplier of natural gas, alleviating some of the pressures caused by Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war. Norwegian supply to Italy has actually increased from 3% to 11% of the total consumption this year. In a joint statement with the EU Commission from June this year, the EU underscored the reliability of Norway as a safe and prudent supplier of oil and gas to Europe over the last 50 years, from fields all over the Norwegian continental shelf. However, we also need to look ahead for more sustainable energy solutions, and Norway will significantly scale up production of new renewable energy resources: land wind, offshore wind, hydrogen, CCS, batteries. Norway stands ready to be Europe's close industrial partner in this field, and northern Norway will be a key region in this regard. Let me end with a few words about where we stand with regard to cooperation in the Arctic. Uncertainty and inability to do business as usual with Russia as an Arctic state and neighbor makes it even more important to maintain existing platforms for discussing Arctic issues. In April, May next year, Norway will take over the leadership in the Arctic Council from Russia. The work of the Council was paused after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. However, project activities not involving Russia have now been resumed. Although much is uncertain at the moment, we continue our preparations. It will definitely be a different leadership than what we had anticipated. The leadership program will be launched early next year. The main priorities will revolve around climate, environment, oceans, people in the north, and sustainable resource management. A key goal will also be to preserve the Arctic Council itself as the prominent forum for Arctic issues. A prolonged break in the Council's work is not in our interest. We therefore continue our very close discussions with the Nordic countries, US, the United States, and Canada on the way forward. We recognize that Russia, as the largest Arctic country, has a natural place in the Council, but at the same time, seeking the reintegration of Russia under the current regime is not possible. I'm glad that this year's Arctic Connections not only looks at the present, but also allows us to discuss and envision an Arctic future based on common understanding and cooperation. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We thank you very much for the contribution you gave to all those who are not very familiar with the strategic importance of the Arctic. And also for the reference you mentioned to the fact that there is a lack of cooperation from a country which is a very important country in the Arctic region. You mentioned Russia. We know, all of us, very well how and why Russia cannot be included right now in the fruitful cooperation which we had many years ago. But I am sure that all of you, and I'm sure you personally, and also as an eminent representative of your country, you wish that as soon as possible we can have a new, I would say, architecture in the Arctic region, which will allow all the countries to reestablish a Pacific and fruitful cooperation. Thank you very much. Before to give the floor to Professor Carrozza, I would like to mention that we are not all here in this room to attend and to follow and to participate to the event, because you cannot see those who are not looking at the screen, but there are exactly in this moment 100 persons participating online and following online this event, which is also in live on YouTube. So it is, which is a confirmation of the importance that many people are attaching to this kind of cooperation. Professor Carrozza, a lei la parola. Grazie.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here representing the National Research Council in giving the welcome address to this seminar, which is important for us and for the scientific community in order to understand the importance and the strategic relevance of our investment in Arctic, in research, innovation, and also international policies and collaboration. So the Arctic, from the scientific point of view, is a key area for the acceleration and amplification of climate change and global warming. CNR leads and coordinates scientific activities in liaison with several other scientific institutions and universities in Italy, and in collaboration with other countries, and Norway in particular. So I've been and visited the base in the Arctic, and when I visited, it was a pleasure. And there were a lot of young scientists from all around Italy running and visiting and doing experiments over there. So it's an important experience in the lifetime of scientific investigators and young people in understanding the importance of the Arctic antenna to understand climate change. CNR maintains a base and a number of observing systems, facilities of different kind, instruments in Ny-Ålesund, Svalbard, with a focus on the impact of climate change on the Arctic cryosphere, permafrost, atmosphere, and oceanographic fjord dynamics and water exchange with the fjord systems. And on these topics, we sustain a long-term project, a national research program, which is run in the framework of CNR, through the National Arctic Scientific Committee, with the participation of several members and scientific advisors from different communities. This committee on Arctic science is chaired by Minister Carmine Robustelli. He will speak in a different session today. CNR also sustains Arctic research, participating to the European Union funded projects and in a major industry funded project focused on the destabilization of permafrost and the regional changes in atmospheric circulation. And of course, CNR sustains the participation of Italy as observer to the Arctic Council by providing scientific information on the critical environment issues in the area, and we participated to different international Arctic Science Committee and the European Polar Board, and we represent also Italy in the Sustaining Arctic Observing Network. It's important to state that in the reform plan that we are currently running in the National Research Council, our Institute for Polar Research is becoming an important antenna in order to keep and sustain this research with international facilities and infrastructure, and also by also encouraging Arctic presence of Italy and Italian researchers. So we will give to this institute a relevance, a strategic relevance in the framework of our policy and scientific policy. So the cooperation with Norway is a key issue, and I am here for that reason, and also to open for further investigation. We will also participate in the further conference that I know on the Arctic Frontiers meeting, which I know is very relevant for Norway. So I'm happy to be here, and I will try to support this initiative and the cooperation, and I know from the program that there are also relevance not only from the scientific point of view, but also international relations, policies, peacekeeping, which is now very relevant, and the resource management and the biodiversity keeping. Biodiversity for us at the research, at the National Research Council is one of the key issues for future research. We are currently developing a new National Research Center on biodiversity, and we also have recently received a donation, important donation. We have a new oceanographic vessel, which is now under restoration, and we are installing several instruments, and we will make a campaign all around the ocean for scientific monitoring of biodiversity and other scientific issues. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Carrozza. It is a great honor, believe me, for us here in SIOI to welcome you and to hear from you such an extremely interesting commitment of the National Council. National Council, which is, I would like to say, the most important institution in Italy in the field of research. And so the fact that you accepted our invitation, your presence here is a witness once again of your engagement and the sympathy which you are looking at us and wishing further cooperation, not only in the field of Arctic, but also in the many fields where SIOI is engaging. I give the floor now to Rear Admiral Nannini, who is the director of the Institute of the Italian Hydrographic Institute of our Navy. Please, Admiral.
Thank you, Ambassador. Actually, thank you, ambassadors, for the invitation. Forgive me, I do not have a written speech, but I think that I would try to be much more, I would say, active, trying to provide what the Navy, what the Hydrographic Service is doing in the Arctic, especially with Norway. So as Ambassador Sessa mentioned, the history of the Italian Navy in the Arctic goes a couple of centuries ago started, and the reason are several. But from the Navy standpoint, it is clear that we are focused now in better understanding what is going on in the Arctic, and especially what is going on with Russia. So we don't have to hide behind our head behind the sand. We are all really committed to understand what is happening with Russia also in this area, part of the world. So the Navy, in fact, participated also with a couple of ships, actually with one of our major ships in one of the North region campaign this year with the ITS, the carrier Garibaldi. That was the first time that the carrier was working at that latitude. So just as a really testimony how the Navy is really looking forward to much more cooperation, you know. This is anyway pretty new for us. And the Navy is really looking forward to move in this direction, also from the scientific side, where it comes in my field as the director of the Hydrographic Service. We started 6 years ago a program that is called High North, and was supposed to be a 3-year, that was renewed for another 3 years, and we finished this year the second round, let's say, of 3 years, and we are starting again another 3-year program for the next 3 years. And we are in the process of acquiring and building a new surveying ship with polar capabilities. So the Navy is spending something around 600 million euros to renew the oceanographic fleet, and the major ship will be mainly deployed in the polar area. So this is a great commitment from the Navy that will be not only Navy to Navy. Of course, there will be Navy to Navy activities, but it will be Navy to community. And especially in the field where I'm working, I just came back a couple of weeks ago from the Regional Arctic Hydrographic Commission that was in Canada this year. And we really talk a lot about what we can do better. Russia, of course, was excluded, was not invited. We all know the story. But there is a lot of things that we can do, even if Russia is now, let's say, in a standby position. So we all agreed that we have to share more and we have to cooperate more. I would say in our field, we are doing pretty well because there is a structure and an organization that is working and has a long history, but there is still something more to do. And with Norway, I would say that we have a special relation. Personally, I've been in Norway tens of times, and I had the honor also to be the head of the mission a couple of times on board the ITS Alliance, the NATO ship that with the Italian flag, Italian Navy flag. And I spent also a long tour in the winter up in the north. So I know what does it mean working in that area and connecting with people and connecting with the institution and the people that are working there. Talking about our cooperation and collaboration, Navy and Hydrographic Service is totally open. That's why one of the major success, I would say, of our project is the collaboration with everybody and the sharing of the data with all the organizations. First, with Norway, because we are collecting, for example, hydrographic data that we provided to your hydrographic service in order to update nautical chart. This is just an example. but also sharing data at the military level and the scientific level. So I think that the collaboration, as far as it is today, is good. There's always room for improvement, but I would say that you are one of our best partners that we have definitely in the area. So, and we are looking forward to do more. And that's why, again, we are really investing a lot of money in having one ship that will be completely owned by the Navy, that will be able to work more and cooperate more in that field. Talking about this event, this international symposium, unfortunately, it is the first time that I am attending, but my staff that is sitting right there, they are experts, I would say, and collaborative with you, as you know, and I'm happy that they are here today. And I was honestly attending another important meeting of the International Geographic Organization in Monte Carlo, but this morning I said, no, I have to be there because I want to be here today, and tomorrow I'll be back in Monaco, but I want to be here today because it was important to be here, not showing only our uniform, but really to show how much the Navy, the Italian Navy, is committed in the Arctic, is committed in the collaboration and cooperation with Norway, and committed to this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral. We appreciate that you renounced to Monte Carlo. But allow me to say that it is not a great sacrifice because see, if you have to choose between Monte Carlo and Rome, there is no alternative. I appreciate very much. Your presence is very important because of the commitment of our Navy. I stress the importance of the Navy, and I did on purpose, because you should know, those who are not very familiar with diplomacy have to know that the first who joined, who cooperate with diplomacy in Italy has been the Navy. Our Navy, they have there are excellent books on research travels made by our ships in 18th even century, discovering places where there was even not an ambassador, and sometimes they have been the first ambassador of the growing Italy in the world. So it's very important. Of course, I can stress that I have been a witness of the cooperation between Norway and the Italian armed forces, and mainly in this case, the Navy, having served at NATO for some years, so I am quite familiar of the strong cooperation. We go now on the field, because until now all of us have been speaking from far away. Now we are approaching to the field, and I am very pleased to give the floor to Professor Frode Melvik, who is the director of the High North Center Nord University Business School in Bodø. I take this opportunity to say that I don't know how many of you have been in Bodø. I have been in Bodø. It was 1979. Many of you were even not yet born. 1979, there was in Bodø a big event, a big meeting of NATO, of the ministers of defense of NATO, members of what at that time was called NATO Planning Group, dealing mainly with atomic and nuclear issues. But I remember very well, I was a junior diplomat at that time in the Italian delegation, and I remember that we started even to talk about Arctic cooperation. So it was really very interesting and a very nice and pleasant place to visit. I give you the floor, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riccardo Sessa, and Your Excellencies, distinguished participants. at this very important seminar. I will follow up what Cesar said about Bodø. In 79, 79, that is a long time ago. So I will start
Don't tell me,
in inviting you to come to Bodø in April 2023, because then we will have our High North Dialogue, as we call the Arctic High North Dialogue Conference in Bodø. And we are focusing on some of the same topics as will be discussed during this seminar. And let me add that we are quite many from Bodø and from the High North Center and from Northern Norway and all Norway here at the seminar. And the reason is that we think it's very important that we discuss these issues internationally and not at least in Europe. And we appreciate very much what SHOI has been doing in putting together this very important and interesting program. And we are very happy for being cooperating with SHOI since 2017. And just to put you into the local context, then Alessandra came to that conference that I am inviting you to, Mr. Cesar. So, and that changed some of our thinking, and probably it also influenced the thinking of SHOI. So to me, it is important in all times, and not at least in these times. Let me tell you a little about the High North Center, because the High North Center for Business and Governance at the Nord University is a national center in the way that we are financed by the Norwegian government. And of course, we have a lot of projects financed by the Research Society, by companies, and by governmental entities. And we are very international. I don't think there are anything in Northern Norway that is not international. Maybe Northern Norway is the most international part of Norway, and the High North Center is very, very international. Maybe not all of you know that the Norwegian government, and the ambassador was into that, has even declared the High North, the Arctic, as the most important strategic priority area for Norway, meaning that we have to cooperate internationally, not only in the Arctic, but also with a lot of others. And that is our duty. We should develop and communicate knowledge about what are the opportunities for the societies and business in the Arctic. And just to give you some kind of an example of our international engagement, during the last 3 weeks, we have been at seminars in Washington, D.C. We have been at seminars in Anchorage, in Alaska. We have been at seminars in Reykjavik. We have been at seminars in Svalbard. And now we are here. And of course, we love to travel. We could say that, but we are traveling because we need to be in dialogue with those who are interested and engaged in what happens in the Arctic. I should also say that the terrible Russian attack on Ukraine and the awful war in Ukraine are influencing us at the High North Center for Business and Governance very much. We have been working closely with Russian institutions for more than 30 years. We have developed very important and influential master and PhD program cooperation with a lot of Russian universities. And there are several thousand students that have been educated in our programs. Today, these programs are on hold, and we can't even have contact with our friends and colleagues in Russia. And of course, that is influencing us, not only in our work, we have a lot of other projects to do, but in our thinking, and it is influencing also the ideas about what can we do in the future. And maybe not all of you know that, but at the same time, Nord University is the university in Norway that has the widest engagement in Ukraine. We are involved in cooperation with 18 Ukrainian universities. And the Minister of Education and Science in Ukraine, he's a close friend of us. He has been in Bodø, and we have PhD programs, we have master programs, we have other programs together also with Ukrainian universities. And we do what we can to support and help our Ukrainian friends and colleagues today. And we even try to run the programs, even though it is very, very difficult, because, you know, the Ukrainian students, they are trying to keep on their education as best as they can, sitting there in cellars and all around using digital tools to do that, but it's difficult. So we are in the middle of that. We are really influenced by this tragedy going on in Europe. I mentioned for you that we should develop and communicate knowledge about the opportunities in the Arctic, both for societal development and for business. And I will mention for you that we have our own newspaper, the High North News. And the newspaper comes out every day, nearly all around the year, and telling about what is going on in the Arctic, about tensions and about also opportunities. So if you will follow up on what is going on in the Arctic, I will recommend you to go to the highnorthnews.com. And if you can't do that every day, you could sign up for a weekly newsletter where you have the headlines of what is going on in the Arctic. We are so happy that the editor-in-chief, Arne Oholm, is present with us, and you will meet him. But also for those of you who now are online, digitally, and some of your students, I think High North News is a very valuable source to be updated about what is happening. I should also mention the High North Dialogue once more, the conference, because today we have had a very productive meeting with the management at SHOI. And we have been thinking ahead what we could do to strengthen our cooperation, both to the benefit of SHOI and Italy and to the benefit of the High North Center and Norway. And probably SHOI will organize a side event at our conference in April with the topic, something like this, North seen from the South. And we are looking very much forward to that because we need these perspectives. We have also been discussing how could we increase our research cooperation. And when I'm so happy that I have the National Research Council of Italy so present, I think I will give a hint that, of course, we need all these natural science research projects. They are so important. But remember that it's not natural science that is creating the problems in Europe today. It is the social sciences. It is how we understand communities, how we understand people, how we understand businesses. Yeah, that we need to know a lot more about. So we hope that we could be very deep in going into projects dealing with what is happening in the Arctic scene, both from the south and from the north. So that was just a hint when you are developing your Arctic research strategy. Because in Norway, just to be honest, in Norway, we are addressing this very, very much. Of course, we need all this natural science kind of research, technology research and all that. But we need to understand the societies. We need to understand what is going on and where could the risks be and where could the opportunities be, where could the threats be. So I hope that we will be able to do research together. We are dreaming about having more PhD students together. We are really dreaming about creating something that will grow and grow to the benefit of both our nations. Then I will end with saying that we were so lucky that we started this in 2018. And we are working, SHOI especially, but some of us at the Heinrich Center too, working to develop the program. But the Norwegian embassy here located here in Rome for Italy has always been very close to us. And we appreciate very much that, because us being some kind of research institutions, universities, think tanks, there are very often not so much resources to put everything together. And at the same time, we have some perspectives, but there are quite many perspectives that we need to take into us that we are not thinking about. The dialogues with the embassy has always been very good. So thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for doing this. And we hope we will continue that good cooperation. And then the last thing, I will thank all who will participate with their contribution in this seminar. And I think those who have prepared these speeches and their reflections, of course, that is very valuable. But I hope also that the audience will take part in this and also ask questions. And there are so much that we do not know. And at this time, there are so much that we should be wondering about. So please be active, and let us hope that after the conference, when we end tomorrow, we will leave this room saying that this has meant something. This has been a step that has meant something for each of us, and probably also for our institutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I don't want, of course, to anticipate the conclusions of tomorrow's work, but you should be sure, and I am more than sure that you have been, before coming to Rome, that in this house is also your house. You know, for the Italians, Arctic finally is not something very close, as you can imagine. But when in CIOI we decided to dedicate, to concentrate our attention also on Arctic issues, we made a choice. And this is the choice which has been guiding us all these 7-8 years. And so you can be more than confident that this kind of cooperation, I would say this kind of friendly relationship will continue. And in this spirit, I have also to thank the Norwegian embassy in Rome, because I know how the embassy has been important and cooperative with our staff, not only in organizing this event, but on the daily issues relating to Arctic. We are at the end of the introductory remarks of this symposium, so we will start the first panel. So I will call the participants to replace us at this table. The issue is a very important one, because the Arctic dilemma, regional dynamics of a security in transition, which will touch many and some of the very crucial issues that we mentioned in our introductory remarks, because of course the dilemma of that region is that we are now facing a bloody tragedy which we would never have been facing, and we never imagined that we could happen. And we hope that with the efforts of all those who believe in the truth, I underline this concept of the truth, we can find as soon as possible a solution for, and also allowing once again the Ukraine university you mentioned to restart your cooperation with you. Thank you very much. noi ci vediamo stasera poi. Tra un anno? E prima dov'è?
Capo di protocollo.
Io ho sempre lavorato molto con i suoi colleghi alla
Yeah, sitting very low. Yeah, but the third one is online actually. Yeah, so I was just curious how we could see her. Yeah.
Although I'm Norwegian.
I'll move close myself.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me? This is Clara Gansland speaking from Brussels.
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. Hello. I just wanted to test that.
Through that.
Okay, and so they will just go and into English, I guess.
Yes, it can be on the English. The person will arrive here.
Okay.
Mm.
So, and I can roll down. I don't lose them if I can't read them at the beginning. Yeah, because yeah, we don't read. Okay, good. I will. Try to look out for it. All right. I need some water. It's a lot warmer here than in the Arctic, even if you are telling me that it's getting warmer in the Arctic. It's not that. Is that not hot? Dear participants, dear friends, dear panelists, my name is Arne Oholm, and I have the pleasure of moderating this debate on the very interesting and serious topic, regional dynamics of security in transition. And thank you to Ambassador Sessa and the introduction panel for a very interesting start, which we are going to probably dig a little deeper into. We are representing different positions in Europe. In the recent few months, I have visited the 3 borders that Arctic have to Russia. We was in Alaska, as Frode said, just a couple of days ago. This winter, I traveled for 2 months along the Finnish border, along Russia. And I don't live as a northern Arctic human, not far from the Norwegian-Russian border. That is a situation that makes impact on all of us living in the high north. So, and it's very interesting to move to Italy, in Rome, to discuss, to listen to how this perspective looks from the European Union, from Italy, and also from Norway. I mean, Italy has a history in Arctic that is, well, it's an old history, but also a new history with energy and science, as mentioned, oil, shipyards, and the Navy, of course, which I met this winter during the cold response military session in the northern part of Norway, where Italy was. I was with a lot of people actually taking part, together with some 25 or 27 nations actually, in the northern part of Norway. So that is a kind of a background. for this discussion and my background for this discussion. On a daily basis, I am editor, as I said, in High North News. That is an online newspaper that reports about business and governance in the whole Arctic. And of course, since the 24th of February, a lot of our story, the main part of our story is on security issues and the way the Arctic people have to react and live in the new situation. So in this panel, I am very happy to have a representative from the European Union. She's with her online, that is Clara Gansland. She's the EU Special Envoy for Arctic Matters at the European External Action Service. Can you hear us, Gansland? That is good.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much. We can hear you and hope the audience as well. On my right-hand side, Professor Aldo Pigoli on international relations and international relation analysis at the Catalog University of the Sacred Heart of Milan. Very welcome to you, Mr. Pigolo.
Thank you very much.
And on my right-hand side, a good friend and colleague, Andreas Östhagen, Senior Advisor at High North Center at the Nord University, and also a Senior Research Fellow at Fridtjof Nansen Institute, which is an institute who deals a lot with Arctic issues and are a very important part of the public debate around what's going on in the Arctic. So this is my impressive panelist, and we have decided that each of the panelists will get some 6 or 7 minutes to introduce what they think are important and things we have discussed on forehand. So I will give the floor to each of them, and when we have finished that, it's kind of up to you. Either you are here as an audience or you are online, to send me some questions, and I will forward them to the panelists. And if you are quiet, I have quite a few questions myself I would like to ask, but you are the important part of this panel as far as I wish it. So please, Clara Gansland, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me address this very important SOE symposium. And indeed, as you said also, Mr. Moderator, it was a very interesting start. And I'm sorry I could not be in present part of your distinguished panel, but I'm very happy still to be able to have this opportunity to speak on the EU perspective. So the European Union is following developments in and around the Arctic regions very closely. We published an updated Arctic policy document last year in 2021 in October. And throughout, we have been in very close contact with our EU member states about Arctic matters. So it's really an issue which is very well anchored within the European Union. Now, clearly, the geopolitical developments in 2022 have had a major impact on everyone's attention, also to developments in the Arctic regions. So we have this European Union policy that dates back from October last year. It's a policy that is really the result of a lot of work and very broad consultations. And it builds on the previous policies, but the main priorities remains the same. So it's about climate protection, climate change, environment protection, and about creation of green jobs. On climate change, this remains the biggest threat to our planet. And we must uphold multilateral cooperation. And Arctic resources, energy and minerals, as well as fisheries and tourism, can play a key role here. In the EU policy, we speak about importance to enhance international cooperation. Now, obviously, the Russian brutal invasion of Ukraine has thrown up many questions and really caused a major interruption to Arctic cooperation. As in all other areas, also in the Arctic context, we concur that we cannot work with Russian interlocutors on a business as usual basis. And the EU fully concurs with the decision taken by the 7 like-minded Arctic states to pause cooperation with Russia in the Arctic Council, which is also mirrored in the Barents Euro-Arctic Council and the Northern Dimension policy framework. The geopolitical situation after 24th February means that we see increased attention to hard security issues in many parts of the world, and this also affects the Arctic region. But I think there is not going to be a revision of our Arctic policy document because it is there. It was the state of affairs in October last year, but it is a living policy and it contains many tools. That policy has many tools that we can use in developing our relationships. Now, on the effects of the Russian war on Ukraine, the situation is now, as we know, that the like-minded have paused Russia from the Arctic cooperation. But that, of course, doesn't mean that the problems facing the Arctic have gone away. As I already said, we think climate change being the major problem. So it actually makes it even more imperative that we work closely together, and more urgently that we work together with like-minded partners. We were pleased to see that the 7 like-minded members of the Arctic Council have decided to restart certain work again, as we heard previously from His Excellency, the Ambassador of Norway. We in the European Union have our own programs. We have research programs, we have regional development programs, we have programs in science, space. So we have a huge amount of activities in the Arctic, and that we can do. I mean, we have had to modify terms of reference in certain cases that there was some Russian involvement, but now we can continue where they are not involved. And we do see that the EU policy, in the policy, we have a really good basis to continue the work and to intensify cooperation with our friends across, also across the Atlantic. And if you allow me, I would just like to touch on Greenland relationship briefly, because this is a good example of dynamics. And here we have a new office of the European Union, which should open officially next year. We are in the process now of putting together logistics and finding the staff. But it's really so important to be there on the ground and to be able to talk directly to the people so that we can properly interact and discuss future cooperation and broaden the cooperation. Now we are talking about the green shift, and we are encouraging the mining for critical minerals. And here we see, for example, Greenland as a potential major source of that. And we encourage European investment there. Also, I would like to say that the situation for indigenous peoples and implications for the future, this is in our Arctic policy. We highlight the importance of early, robust inclusiveness when developing projects on lands of indigenous peoples. I stop here because time is short, and I know we will also have a questions and answer session. So I think perhaps it's better to leave time for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. I hope we didn't lose you, Glansland, because we, as you say, will have a Q&A. I didn't ask where you are. Are you in Brussels now, or where are you? Yeah, okay.
Excuse me, did I hear that the question was if I am in Brussels?
Yeah.
And that is, yes, that's the case.
Okay.
I'm in Brussels now. Thank you.
Good to know where we are geographically, because now we are moving to Rome, and I'm really looking forward to listen to you, Professor Aldo Pigolo.
Yes, Thank you very much. It's quite a pleasure to be here, and I, of course, be honored, and also I feel a bit emotional because I've been teaching here in SIOI since 2005. This is quite my home. I'm very grateful to President Frattini, of course, and all the SIOI members and staff for having invited me, and also, of course, all the authorities and organizations that made it possible. And my perspective is, of course, as you mentioned, Professor, a perspective from outside the North Pole and the Arctic area. It's a perspective based on the way we try to understand international relations, analysis, and geopolitical issues, how they are moving and going on, depending on some events, dynamics, but also on the medium to long run. And because we are supposed to talk about perspectives and also future potential scenarios about the recent evolutions and what is going on. Well, before talking about what could be of interest for Italy and what is the Italian posture towards what is happening in the Arctic region, we should consider that, of course, now we are stressing and focusing, and that it's correct, about what happened in February and what is going on. And of course, we cannot avoid to blame Russia for what they did and what they're still doing, not only in Ukraine, but what is basically something that is a game-changing factor in international relations, not only in Europe. But we should consider also that the recent developments related with climate change issues affecting the Arctic area have been producing effects and outcomes regarding security in a broader sense well before the Ukraine crisis. So we have to keep in mind that, of course, now we are within something that we don't know what its trajectory could be. I'm talking about the Russia-Ukraine crisis and conflict. But we have to keep in mind that to focus and to address properly the security evolutions in a broader term of this region, we have to go a bit back and try to understand. And of course, I think my colleague has been working a lot on some of the topics I'm mentioning about the geoeconomic aspects, the geopolitical evolutions, and of course, about all the cultural and scientific elements that could help us better try to address what is happening and try to better figure out what could be the future evolution. Talking with Arne before my speech last week, we were trying to focus out, for example, what are the Italian interests related with the Arctic region and what could be, because we don't know what would be the foreign policy of our next government. We don't yet have a government. We suppose we will have one because of the election results, and try to figure out what could be Italian commitments and postures and positions about the Arctic region. Well, Italy is strongly related with the Arctic. We have already listened a lot about the involvement, commitments from many points of view, from the scientific one, the political one, the defense and security one. I know tomorrow we will talk about economic aspects, and Italy is strongly involved in many economic dynamics in terms of research, investments, et cetera. Many Italian companies, big Italian companies, are on the ground in the Arctic. Therefore, Italy is, even if far away geographically, a lot related and influenced by what is happening in the Arctic area, apart from the recent evolutions. And some publications, some experts have tried in recent months and recent years I've tried to figure out if the evolution, the geoeconomic evolution in the north could have been affecting broadly Italy and its position at geoeconomic level, or geopolitical level in Europe and internationally. And there is this attempt to try to compare the Arctic Sea and the Mediterranean Sea from the point of view of Rome. Somebody has said, well, the fact that new routes are opening up, potentially, in the north, will give a smaller leverage to those countries within the Mediterranean, and we are in the mid of the Mediterranean, that are key for the biggest trade routes that cross the globe, basically the one across the Suez Channel and the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. And well, we don't know, because we still have to understand if there will be new maritime routes and how we could use them. But of course, something is moving on, and all the actors involved from this point of view, economically speaking, but also politically speaking, in terms of building infrastructure, defined strategies are looking at this point. But of course, at this element. But of course, the key element that is coming out, that has come out in recent years, is the fact that geopolitically speaking, the North area, the Arctic area, is becoming more and more relevant. Think, for example, about the NATO enlargement, with Finland and Sweden probably being next members of NATO. And what, for the Mediterranean countries as Italy, this could mean in terms of a shift on the focus on what is pivotal or not. The recent, nearly published strategic document from NATO, the new doctrine, has given a lot of stress at the High North issues, and there is no mention about North Africa, the Mediterranean Basin, and the Sahel region, which are critical for our foreign policy, security, and the perception we have about our role as a middle power and our role within the NATO system and the European Union system. If we have to sum up direct consequences about the last point, well, we can think pink and think from the Italian point of view and perspective. Well, this creates an opportunity. The more our partners will focus on the North, the more our position will increase in relevance within the Mediterranean. That could be a good point. And at the same time, our interest in the northern area of Europe and in the Arctic region could be stirred up and pushed. And that's great. But if you think like Black Rose, well, we could see that the fact that the NATO system on which we based our security, not only the concrete security, but the idea of the development of the security and of the strategic relevance of our international position is moving east or is moving north. Well, probably it could make people in the policy-making buildings think a lot about this and trying not to answer, but to prepare themselves and to figure out what could it mean. Of course, the NATO doctrine tells us that we should consider with a 360 holistic way within the NATO, and also thinking about the documents from the European Union about defense and security. We should think in a broader sense, in a broader term. We have different scenarios, different areas, we should be engaged, etc., etc. But at the same time, from the analytical point of view, policies requires money, policies require investments, require strategies, and I don't like the zero-sum game. So if I do this, I cannot do that. But in some cases, we should be better focused concretely on what could be the future development to better help ourselves to structure the potential strategies that will be useful for us, but also to be part of the common attempt by the EU and by the NATO to face the nowadays and future not only threat, but the future challenges, also the future opportunities. And let me close, I'm thinking I'm running out of time, saying, and I really appreciated your point, His Excellency, when you reminded us about our no flow of tensions, about the fact that you as your country has taught us how to try to deal with a critical actor, which is Russia, in an attempt to put Russia again within the partnership, within the negotiation processes that the Arctic region need, but I think that we all need to get on in a peaceful way and try to avoid conflict. And I would like that we won't focus too much on defense and security issues, but as the panel before us has clearly highlighted, we should focus on all the dimensions. And as many diplomats are here, I suppose, and you taught me that negotiation and diplomacy are not only the official one. There are also track 2 diplomacies made by think tanks, made by NGOs, made by also companies that help build a peaceful scenario in order to build up our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aldo, for a very interesting perspective, and I'm sure we will get back to some of the elements here. I just want to say, I don't know if the figures are right, but we have still more than 100 online viewers, and I would just repeat that we are taking questions from you as well as from the audience when we have been through this introduction. So next fellow, Andreas Östhagen, he is from the north, but he lives in Oslo. And just as a fun fact, the distance from the capital of Oslo to Rome are approximately exactly the same as from Oslo to Kirkenes, the most east northern city, the border city in Norway. That tells you something about kind of strange country up there in the north. So please, Andreas.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holm. I'm not sure if you meant that this means that I should move further south or if I should come back to Bodø, but yes, maybe one day I'll move back to the Norwegian Arctic. In my 6-7 minutes, we'll see if I can stick to the time. I'll talk a bit more about security and the specific securities of the Arctic. But first, I just want to thank COI for organizing this event. It's the third time that I'm taking part. Did not take part the last time, but the 2 times before. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm so glad that you also focus on not only the opportunities in the Arctic, but also, as we are talking about, the challenges also when it comes to security and geopolitics. I have a presentation with a couple of slides. Is it showing, perhaps? Yes, 1 minute. Excellent. I mean, the slides are not all that important, but they do help you to focus your eyes on something else than just me. Arctic geopolitics. We have a tendency to describe the Arctic in one word, in these big words, Arctic geopolitics. This cartoon is from The Economist in 2006, after Russia planted a flag at the seabed under the North Pole. And ever since then, we still tend to talk about the Arctic geopolitics, confusing many different things into one. So the Arctic is, in fact, if you ever had the chance to go to the Arctic, you will realize, right, that the Arctic is a vast region consisting of multiple countries, 8, in fact, different people, different indigenous people as well, and different climatic conditions. And this idea that we have to often equate, this is not functioning. It's on, yes. The idea that we often confuse different things together under the umbrella of Arctic geopolitics. So ice is melting in the north, yes. There are resource opportunities in the north, yes. There's shipping opportunities in the north. Russia is the dominant actor, as we've to some extent have discussed already. China is showing an interest. NATO is interested and engaged in the Arctic, and so is many other actors around the world. But the problem with all of this is that it's too simplistic. It's too simplistic to talk about one region, one set of geopolitics in the north. In fact, there's different types of security dynamics in different parts of the Arctic. In many ways, it's like saying geopolitics of the Mediterranean. Then you as Italians in the room will probably ask me, what do you mean? Are you talking about the eastern part of the Mediterranean, the western part? Which issue are you talking about? Which actors are you talking about? No, it's...
It's always a risk with showing slides.
With PowerPoints, yes.
PowerPoints, technology. But I know you scientists love it.
We do. If you have no point, use PowerPoint. Okay, I'll just continue then. So that's my first point, right? When we talk about Arctic geopolitics, actually it's an inaccurate term, right? We need to be specific about what we are talking about, especially when it comes to security. And if we then try to look at the intra-regional dynamics in the Arctic, when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to the possibility of conflict or disputes emerging amongst the Arctic countries, there's also a tendency to neglect the fact that the ambassador the ambassador to Norway already highlighted that actually the Arctic is a governed space. The law of the sea provides exclusive economic zones that covers most of the Arctic. There's no boundary dispute or border dispute on land in the Arctic. There's no territorial dispute. The last territorial dispute in the Arctic was the tiny island between Canada and the Kingdom of Denmark that was settled earlier this year. There's only one boundary dispute at sea that is unsettled, and it's between Canada and the US. So this idea that you often hear in European media, in international media, also Norwegian media, this idea that the Arctic is ungoverned space, that there's a rush or a race for the Arctic, actually does not make sense. There are a few issues in the Arctic that concerns some different interpretations of legal treaties or resource governance, especially at sea, that at times cause dispute, not outright conflict, but cause dispute amongst Arctic states. Yes, but that's not the same as this idea of a race towards the Arctic or a rush towards the Arctic to claim resources or territory. And this map just highlights the maritime zones in the Arctic itself. So as you can see, most of it is already covered. And even this donut hole at the middle of the Arctic Ocean, there, which is currently covered by ice, even there, the extended continental shelves that some of the Arctic states are claiming, as they are allowed to per law of the sea, there the extended continental shelves will also render any kind of dispute over the minerals or oil and gas irrelevant. So not to say that geopolitics doesn't exist in the Arctic, but if we are to talk about, in this case, intra-regional geopolitics in the north, let's be specific about what we're talking about, where we're talking about it. And then, when it comes to the real driver of the geopolitics in the Arctic, if you will, security concerns in the Arctic, it's the spillover from things happening elsewhere. And the first panel, and also my fellow panelists in this panel, have highlighted very well, right, the effects of the Russian invasion on Ukraine earlier this year. And this is what really causes tension in the Arctic. But then, if you want to unpack how this tension looks like, what the conflict potential might be, you can't talk about the Arctic as a region. You actually have to look at sub-regions of the Arctic. You have to look at specifically these two parts of the Arctic that I highlight here. The Bering Sea, Bering Strait region to the south of on the map, or this map, and then the Barents Sea, the North Atlantic part of the Arctic on the top of the picture. Because there is no military activity taking place in the middle of the Arctic. I mean, the ice covered area here, there is no military activity there. There's no military interaction there. The military activity that we are seeing, the increase in exercises, provocative maneuvers, at times risky behavior from states, we're seeing it in these two different regions. And I won't have time to go into it, but when it comes to the Bering Sea, the Bering Strait region, the main actors, of course, are the US and Russia, right? Alaska and the Chukotka region bordering each other. But we're also seeing China emerging more and more as a region in that specific part of the Arctic. Only a few weeks ago, High North News and Dr. Holm's journalists were reporting on a naval exercise with Russia and China together just outside the coast of Alaska to signal Russian and Chinese cooperation, but also to signal to the US that they're able to and willing to spend more time practicing and preparing in that part of the Arctic. But since we are in Europe and since we are in Rome, what really matters from a European security concern, but also from an Italian security concern, as I think Professor Pigoli is really highlighting, what happens in the Barents Sea is really what sets a lot of the security trajectory in the Arctic. And here, and if you know your history, right, during the Cold War, there was military activity in this part of the Arctic. Russia's Northern Fleet is based on the Kola Peninsula, only 100 miles away from the Norwegian border in Kirkenes. There's security dynamics in the north that have been there, that have been ongoing for a long time during the Cold War, and then also resuming with Russia's great power ambitions over the last 15 years or so. And the more tense the situation gets between NATO and Russia at large, whether it's over Ukraine, as it is right now, or Syria, as it also has been before, the more tense security situation we're also seeing in this part of the Arctic. And the Norwegian ambassador to Italy highlighted the idea of high north, low tension. And I still very much believe that that's the ultimate goal of the Norwegian government and also the NATO alliance in this part of the world. I don't think that's an accurate description of the situation today, but I think it's an ambition and a goal of how we would like it to be. And this, in this part of the world, is really also where Italy can play a role, right? On the one hand, politically, Italy is engaging, or it has been engaging increasingly, as we've heard from different speakers, whether it's through the NATO alliance. NATO is more and more looking to the north, having military exercises in the north to counter Russia in the north. Italy is an integral part of that. Politically, Italy is engaging bilaterally with the Norwegian government as well. And in this context, it becomes again increasingly important then to go back to my first point, to distinguish between the different parts of Arctic geopolitics, to be accurate about which issues and which security concerns we are talking about. And then Italy has also been engaging, as we've heard and as we've seen, with the Italian Navy increasingly also interested in sailing, not in all of the Arctic, or I guess you can say to some extent for research purposes, you can sail all the way to the North Pole. But from a security perspective, the Italian Navy sails in the Norwegian part of the Arctic, the Barents Sea. So I think I'll leave it at that. My main point is just that when we talk about Arctic geopolitics, let's be specific and separate between, say, different types of security dynamics in the North. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas. And just a warming up question to you, actually. Could you take back the picture you had of the North Pole and the unexploited area of where Andreas said that this is the only part where there is a little dispute, but very peacefully. Yeah, you have to go back a little bit to the picture of the North Pole.
Does it work?
Well, we don't need it because I was just trying to test your thesis, Andreas, on the piece in the whole of the Arctic region, because that is a Lomonosov Ridge, actually. You are pointing at which both Russia, Canada, and Denmark, I think, at least 3 countries has asked for sovereignty of the ground on the Lomonosov Ridge. And if we should discuss the Lomonosov Ridge, a year ago, everybody would use that as an example of how diplomatic and peaceful the negotiation in the Arctic are, because this is going to be decided of the United Nations, actually. Isn't that right? That is where they have applied for. But how is that situation today when one of the nation, actually Russia, is claiming this area. Will that still be a peaceful decision, do you think?
Yes, I think so. I don't think that the three countries you highlighted, the Kingdom of Denmark, via Greenland, Canada, and Russia, I don't think they will gather around the table and agree on anything in the coming years. But I mean, this example illustrates my point very well. These three countries have, per law of the sea, put forth claims for an extended seabed that goes all the way to the North Pole. As you say, all three countries claim the North Pole. They've submitted this, per law of the sea, to a commission of the extended continental shelf that sits in New York. This commission has still not posted its findings. It will say, you know, we have looked at the data and it looks like there's an overlap. Then the three countries have to get together and engage in a trilateral or maybe bilateral negotiation. That looks very unlikely today, and that might be politicized as well. You know, if we have a decision coming from this commission saying that you have to negotiate, you know, maybe Vladimir Putin goes out and say, we own the North Pole, this is very important for the Russian nation, the Russian people. But I think it will stop at that. There is the resource potential there is limited. The possibility of extracting it is even more limited. So I don't see this escalating ever into an outright conflict.
Okay, good. It was just a test. You still believe in rationality, and I'm happy to hear that. Gansland, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. I would like to go back to one of the things you mentioned in your introduction, because you were talking about the Arctic strategy from European Union, which was the last one published in 2021. And if I heard you right, you said that there will not be a revision of the Arctic strategy from 2021 from the European Union. Was that correct?
Yes, indeed, because as I outlined, this policy document, it's actually our Arctic policy. We see it as a very good living document. It's speaking about, you know, all the priorities that the European Union have, and setting out climate change as the major threat that we see, and then speaking about everything from peaceful cooperation to I mean, I have the document here in front of me, and I'm sure you have read it as well, over, you know, cooperating on civil protection, civil safety and security challenges, to making the Arctic more resilient to climate change, etc. So we think that this was meant to be in place for a number of years, and that we still can use it. That said, of course, it's not. We don't see this in isolation, and now with the Russian war on Ukraine, of course, energy security has come up to the forefront. We have also discussed already the challenges for the Arctic Council, etc. So we will have to see how to take that into account. But I don't think at this point that we see that there is a need to revise the actual policy document. I hope
okay. You mentioned a couple of reasons why I asked you. Just to mention that Finland, the Finnish people, the Finnish government has revisited their Arctic strategy recently. They started after the 24th of February. United States have revisited, and as you bigly said, not NATO has revisited their strategy. So
no, it was the doctrine, general doctrine.
Yeah, the doctrine. But one of the things that you have in the policy document, Gansland, is that you want Norway and other Arctic countries to ban oil and gas very soon. Is that still the policy from European Union?
Well, I think, as I said, climate change still remains our main. We see this as the main threat, and as you also touched upon, we have of course now this question about energy and energy security. So what I can say is that we continue our aim of being carbon neutral by 2050 at the latest. And this, of course, will require a massive shift in our energy mix towards renewable sources. And this is the desire that we have reflected in the policy and which I say is still very much valid. And indeed, as you mentioned, in this policy, we call for oil, gas, and coal to stay in the ground. And there, so while this fallout of Russia's brutal war on Ukraine has forced us now to look for alternative hydrocarbon sources in the short to medium term, I think that the long-term goal for us remains, and it has only highlighted the need for the green transition to accelerate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I could ask you, Piguli, a follow-up on that, because one of your main points was that we have to keep many dimensions in mind when we discuss also not only the hard security, but how, as a scientist, can we combine, let's say, the goal from the European Union on climate change and the situation we are today? Is that realistic to tell Norway to stop drilling for oil and gas?
Well, it's a big question.
Yeah, I know.
And I think it's a big question that we should address specifically, for example, to Norway, which is quite engaged in this dilemma of developing natural gas and oil, basically, specifically after the evolution of the Ukraine crisis, looking at Europe as a potential, market, but also helping Europe to get to the progressive, transition. And many people said that we need to pass through gas to natural gas to have a true transition, energy transition, which is kind of paradox, of course, but this we have to manage. And I think when I was telling about the multi-domain, we had to keep in mind not only under the defensive or security point of view, but regarding all the aspects, is that, and I was mentioning the period before the Ukraine crisis, to foster cooperation when it comes to climate change and to energy transition. We have to consider that the Arctic region is so relevant when it comes to rare earth materials and critical materials that will help us to more fastly shift towards the transition. So to have the clean transition, the green economy, et cetera, et cetera. And this will probably fuel cooperation from one side, but also competition when it comes to economically speaking, focus on how to get much of those resources under control. And this is the case of, you mentioned China before. China came out, and China is looking to, is looking to become the most relevant actor when it comes to the future rare earth materials leadership in the economic transition of the world. So I think we have to put together those elements to better figure out how to manage. And we have to think about the future and unfortunately focus on what is happening now to better handle everything properly, if I have answered your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And I will ask one or two questions to all of you before I open up from the audience. And I'm still looking at my iPad to see if any of you online have any question, but all of you in your opening remarks talked about the Arctic Council in different way, or at least the Arctic architecture, and from the European Union and from Italy was underlined the importance of Arctic Arctic Council. A couple of questions to all of you. How sure are you that I think it's the 23rd of May next year, the key to the leadership in Arctic Council should be given from Russia to Norway? Are you sure that will happen? And my next question is, what kind of role could an A7 play in the Arctic when half the Arctic is not a part of this architecture or cooperation? I don't know if I could start with you, Andreas. Do you think it's possible that Norway will take the leadership, and is it important?
Yes, I think yes is the answer to both your questions. I'm 59% sure that Norway will have taken the chairmanship of the Arctic Council by 23rd of May next year. I think Norwegian diplomats are working quite hard, also vis-a-vis Russian diplomats. I think there is still contact on lower levels. Don't have this confirmed, so I'm not a member of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I'm speculating as an academic on the outside that Norwegian diplomats are working hard to make this happen in some way, to get Russia, to get maybe the Russian senior Arctic official to hand over, so to say, the keys of the Arctic Council. And it is important, because I don't believe in an A7 constellation. I mean, I believe in it in terms of a liberal democratic point of view, but I don't believe in it in terms of dealing with all the Arctic issues that has to be dealt with, because I think there will be actors on the outside, especially China. And Arne, you were in Reykjavik and heard China say that they will not probably support an Arctic Council A7 without Russia. So I do think that in order to keep the, say, regional architecture, not on security, but on everything else, you need the Arctic Council, the A8, to function. That doesn't mean you need a top-level meeting with Sergei Lavrov. You could have it functioning on a low level, maybe not even an ambassador level, but even just working group level, probably also excluding Russians. But you need the Russian giving away the keys.
Okay, Italy has been a very active observer nation to the Arctic Council. Do you believe that Arctic Council has a life without Russia?
No, I don't think so. Maybe there will be something different. We should call it differently. I completely agree with the statement from Andreas in terms of, yes, the A7, it's good politically, maybe ideologically, but not under an operational point of view, because for many reasons that you already mentioned. You mentioned China, Andreas. China 2 days ago stated that there is no Arctic Council without Russia. So, and they have been asked, you will continue to join, or you will join something different? We don't know. And just to close, my point is, we still have to see the evolutions, because maybe we hope that something will change in the next months in order to give space to negotiation and not to some zero scheme. And I also would like to stress the point of Andreas when he mentioned, well, maybe the Arctic Council could not work properly because of the stalemate, but the Arctic Council's stakeholders, in terms of the scientific stakeholders, the NGOs, the academics, should and must keep on talking together, with or without Russia, just to say where everything is going through, even if there is something that profoundly try to stop. And I think this is a good point. And this symposium, I think it's the right answer for this, one of these points. Thank you.
If you go to the European Union, as far as I understood, the European Union, which not happen to be an observer, have an observer station status, because Russia blocked the European Union from observer station in the European. But is that a common thought that an A7 and Arctic Council without Russia is a possible construction, Gangstrand?
Well, as you said yourself, the EU is not an observer, but we do work very closely with the Arctic Council. And I understand that a lot of very important work is now going on at project level, according to the work program that had been decided before the war, so together with Russia. I agree with the two previous speakers. And I would also like to say that we understand that Norway is really working very hard now on finding solutions for this orderly transfer. So we look forward to that. Thank you.
We'll see. The Norwegian ambassador told us that the program for the Arctic Council from Norway will be presented early next year. So hopefully there will be more than a presentation, but in real politics as well. Well, I would love to have some question from you, audience. Please raise up and tell your name so we can hear you clearly. Do you need a mic since we are online? Where's the mic? Mic is coming.
Okay, Vito Vitale, Polar Institute of CNR. The debate was able me to be more worried than I was before. I'm happy that EU was indicating that priorities not change. We have two completely different perspectives. A long-term perspective where the enemy is climate change. And this is a global enemy and an enemy that doesn't stop. We need to be clear this in mind. Climate change will not stop, and we need to face with this. And happy to know that EU have no intention as a multinational organization thinking long-term perspective. And instead, at the national level, we have this forced by the geopolitical situation to shorten much more our vision to the security, to military, and there are a lot of debates. Never was listened NATO in the last 10 years, like in the last 10 months. Maybe less, okay? Words when we talk about the Arctic. So how to combine these two completely different timeline, okay? And not forget the long term, then we'll be there. When we finish, when Ukraine and Russia will end, the climate change will be there. So how not forget and try to combine the two. I understand the urgency and the force, but we need to work to maintain the problem, our vision in the long-term perspective, because this will be so. And so the question is to the expert of security, etc. I'm a scientist, so I expert on natural science. In which way we can try to keep the countries a little bit engaged with the long-term perspective and not to the short-term terms of the geopolitics and the security?
Thank you very much. If I should try to summarize the Arctic Circle conference in Reykjavik, I would say that most of the speakers still say the climate change was the most dangerous things, but I won't be quoted on that. Well, we are here to discuss the security, but if anybody want to talk about how we could combine climate and war?
No, I mean, that's a very big question. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's go ahead.
May I?
Yes, please. Please, Gansland.
Yeah. No, I'd just like to say on a very personal note that I think that actually when we say climate change, it's not long term, it's happening now. I mean, we've heard the very alarming statistics that the warming is 4 times faster in the Arctic than the global average, and even 7 times faster, I heard recently, in the winter time. And this is causing a lot of as we all well know, dramatic changes with thawing of permafrost and sea level rise and all of that. And this is causing, I would then say, also security and impact right now. So it's not a long-term thing. Everything is linked. I would also like to say, when we speak about security, I very much would like to agree. I think that Professor Pigoli, you said earlier on that we need to focus on broad aspects of security, if I understood correctly. And this I fully also support. I mean, what do we talk about? We have to talk about not only hard security, but also food security, social security, health security, all these things that are important for people that live in the region and that should have this peaceful, sustainable, and prosperous Arctic that we want. So this is how I see that it actually, all the issues are linked. They are together, and we should not separate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas.
I mean, I don't disagree that we should focus on the wider aspects of security, but I mean, Norway, in my perspective as a Norwegian security analyst, we are a bordering country with Russia. And if you ask the citizens in Kiev right now, I don't think that the climate change is on the top of their head. And I think dealing with, of course, we need to deal with climate change, but dealing also with the immediate threat that is Russia and Russian aggression in Europe, and the fear of Russian aggression also in the European part of the Arctic. That's the immediate concern. Of course, climate change is the long-term security concern, but you can combine these two perspectives, I think. But also to also just mention that in a Norwegian debate on how to deal with the green transition, how to deal with climate change and the energy crisis right now, there is a growing movement, and it has been for years, on the green side of aspects, to say that despite Europe right now in great demand of energy, of gas, we should still not open up more oil and gas fields in the Arctic. There's been no decision made on these topics, but it's a growing debate in Norway as well, just to highlight that this tricky situation, it's not like Norway, we're just closing our eyes and, you know, drill, baby, drill. There are wider concerns as well.
It's a very interesting dilemma, this, isn't it? I mean, you're putting on Kiev, people in Kirkenes may feel the same. They are living at the border, and they are also living in the middle of the oil field of the gas production, which now is a part of the hybrid war, maybe against Norway. So, is this a question of where you are living? What is the most important thing? Because I think in Kirkenes they are more worried about the war than the climate these days.
So, well, first of all, climate change is a threat nowadays. It is an issue we are in day-by-day lives. We in Rome, in Milan, in Oslo, wherever, in the Sahel region, wherever we feel that is compulsory to do something now. Last year, we had something revolutionary at international level when at UN level and for many countries, we decided to move concretely toward the energy transition, zero carbon economy, et cetera. And then we had the crisis, and the first answer, concrete answer, was to get back to carbon producing energy supplies, et cetera. And this is a big question and a paradox, of course. People in Norway or people surrounding Ukraine has started to feel not safe, and so they're asking for more security. That's why we have the NATO enlargement issue, et cetera. But what I would like, as an analyst, not as a citizen, so thinking properly of what I'm saying, what I would like to see is not to focus too much on security. What I mentioned before, the strategic document on the Arctic region by the USA that they recently published, mentioned 21 times Russia and 3 times Norway. So I think this is a key point to think. We are stressing not too much, but we are stressing only and paramountly the Russian issue without considering what could be the next future. We are hoping that Mr. Putin will leave the chair, but I think this won't solve the problem immediately. So, okay, maybe we'll stop the conflict. So we have to think broadly, in a very broader terms when it comes to security, considering, as you mentioned, Andreas, that geopolitics is global, local, regional, and we have to address in a proper way any specific dimension and not to melt everything up in a single bowl or in a dichotomic way, we are good, they're bad, etc., etc. I listened to General Graziano, the previous defense chief of staff of Italy, now within Fincantieri in a recent speech, saying that when I was in the Arctic region during the NATO USSR confrontation, we were preparing, we were confronting ourselves towards the threat coming from Moscow. And on the other side, they were doing the same. So I think that we should go forward in this dichotomic vision of we and them, and try to figure out how to address the threat, the military threat that is nowadays in Ukraine, the potential threat in other areas, but also the other security and defense aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as you will know, we will get back to tomorrow panel. We will discuss more of security and energy questions. So we will broaden it out, but I think title of this seminar is Regional Dynamics in the Security and Transition. So, I mean, when living at the border of Russia, it's impossible to not to mention it at least. We got a question from one of our online viewers. Davis, he's from India. He's a student at Moscow State Institute of International Relations, and he has it's an interesting question. I don't know who can answer it. My question is, from 2007, India is emerging as an important player in the Arctic due to its economic and research interests. So what is the possibility of security balance that we can accept in the Arctic when countries like India is involving in the Arctic? Anybody feel for fighting with this question?
Stuff.
If we expand it to China, let's say India and China, and more answers then?
Well, can I try to put a small point? His Excellency, you mentioned, you know, to lower intention, and lower intention means to think globally at how to deal with problems like this. Professor, you mentioned the fact that we have different perspectives. We are talking from different perspectives, and the Indian one is a different perspective. If you hear Indian foreign policy makers dealing with the nowadays situation, they have a completely different position than the Western one. In qualitative terms, not only under their interests. So I think that we could, you know, try to figure out what is the perception of other countries related with the issue, in order not to find a solution or not to change our attitude or our policies, but just to understand that complexity is a good keyword to understand how to deal with such situation. Thank you.
I guess I can just jump in on it. I think when it comes to India, there's questions about, you know, India's interests in the Arctic and which way they will land and what the focus is on. But when you talk about China, I mean, we've seen more of China in the Arctic than we've seen of India in recent years. And I highlighted in my presentation that China is not as relevant in all parts of the Arctic as in others. I mean, in the Bering Sea, Bering Strait, the North Pacific links to the Arctic, China is a close by actor, whereas the Norwegian Arctic, China is rather far away. But as Professor Pigoli also highlighted, Chinese investments, Chinese demand for some of the things that are being developed in the Arctic, rare earth minerals and energy, is also driving a lot of actions. But I think it's maybe going to the long-term, short-term threat. China is a long-term thing that needs to be kept an eye on, but it's not the immediate concern, at least not as I see it in a European Arctic context.
Yeah.
Any more questions, please? The microphone. Yeah, but you got a microphone there.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for your intervention. I'm Giulia Secci from the COI Master in Arctic Studies, and I would like to ask, apart from global general implication, how do you think the European regional security dynamics will be impacted by the recent entry into NATO of Finland and Sweden? Thank you.
Very precise and good question. Maybe we could go to the European Union, Clara Gränsland first. What will the change be when Sweden and Finland? You are Swedish, aren't you? Or am I wrong?
To that question, I can answer yes. So I am Swedish. When it comes to the security implications of Sweden and Finland joining NATO, as European Union, I think we think this is very much for these countries and for the NATO members to pronounce themselves on. I don't think at this point I'd like to or I have anything in particular to add to that. Thank you.
Andreas?
Yeah, I can jump in as well. I think, the immediate short-term answer is that things will get more tense, right? That's obvious. Finland has a 1,360-kilometer long border with Russia, which is now becoming a NATO border. It used to be only Norway in the north that had a direct border with Russia. So of course, I think the security balancing and Russia would need to take into account of this as well, getting NATO even closer in the north, redistributing its forces in the north. And Russia assumedly will also continue with its military exercises. There's an exercise going on right now as we speak, just off the coast of Norway and very close to Finland, aimed at showcasing Russian strength in the Arctic. So I think we will just see more of this as all Arctic states, apart from Russia, are now NATO members. But at the same time, I think a lot depends a bit on the structure of the NATO and of the Swedish and Finnish NATO memberships as well. What kind of restrictions will they put, if any, on themselves? Norway, we have placed restrictions on ourselves in terms of military exercise activity too close to Russia, in terms of foreign bases and nuclear weapons on our soil. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. And I am hoping, and maybe in this seminar, I'm realizing I sound very much like a hardcore security person who only thinks about military day-to-day life. But I'm perhaps hoping that with that question of Swedish and Finnish NATO membership out of the way, there might be more room for Nordic defense collaboration as a subset of NATO, if you will, and perhaps more rooms for separating between us, as Professor Pigoli said, separating between the issues of cooperation on lower levels and security issues. And Arlo Pigoli had a point as well, and he said that the invasion of Ukraine now in February it's not what really completely changed the Arctic security environment, because it was not. Russia has been building up its forces since 2006, 2007. It changed a lot of other things immediately, and it cut diplomatic ties. But in terms of security, it just made things worse, but it was not the complete game changer. And I'm hoping that perhaps there are ways that we can find of collaborating with Russia in the future on low-level issues. Norway still maintains collaboration bilaterally with Russia on search and rescue, on co-management of fish stocks, on Svalbard, on nuclear safety, because we have to. And with two new Nordic NATO members, they also have to collaborate with Russia on some issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's border issues, whether it concerns other things. So perhaps there is some light at the end of the tunnel in that sense.
You mentioned it, Pigoli, in your introduction. Would you say anything more about this question? You said it could change the Italian military approach.
Yeah, well, first of all, I do agree with your point, Andreas. I think that there are lights at the end of the tunnel when it comes to more security because of bigger NATO in the area, not today. And we should always think that if Finland and Sweden want to come to NATO is because Russia is not so sexy for them, and they not join the Russian security system. And that's why it's not only about the Ukraine crisis. There was something before the Ukraine crisis regarding their accession to NATO. And regarding, just to answer the question, regarding how it will affect the EU, well, I think this is the right time for the EU system to think a lot about the deep relations between EU and NATO and what will be the future of those organizations. Because since 1991, we kept on thinking about, well, what about NATO? Should we replace it, close it, redefine it, out of area? Now Afghanistan, it's no more there. Now it's the north, the east, again, the Cold War, so-called war with Russia. So I don't think we should talk about what will be the future on NATO in terms of there will be a future on NATO. There is. I think what will be the future of the European Union foreign policy, defense and security, and how it will match with what is happening regarding NATO. And I think as Europeans, we should consider this as an opportunity to watch ourselves through the mirror and get to you mentioned the truth. What is the truth about the EU evolution? What about our future? Because if not, challenges like this one could be like an earthquake for the destiny of our common future foreign policy and defense and security issues. Thank you.
It's at least a very interesting example of security in transition. I just want to mention, when I started my travel at the Russian-Finnish border at the end of February, there was like maybe 20% of the Finnish people that wanted to join NATO. There was hardly a discussion. And when I ended it 2 months later, after visiting all the checkpoints along the border, there was 83%. And today, for all practical reason, Finland and Sweden is a member of NATO. Any more questions? Okay.
I'm Marco Dordoni. I'm student at COE at Master in Arctic Studies. Thank you for the interesting debate. I have a question for EU envoy Clara Gladstad, focus on the EU cooperation in the Arctic, because I'm interested to know, given that the EU would play a relevant role in the energetic transition, how do you propose to push forward cooperation opportunities between the EU and the Arctic states to pursue a green transition and a total energy security? Thank you for the Gdanstad, but also to everybody, if you want. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you hear the question in Brussels? You have to turn on the sound, I think. We just can't hear you now. I think you are muted. That is the most said sentence last 2 years. I think you still are muted. Well, you are muted. That's the second most said sentence. Should we have some short replies from you while we are waiting, if you had any?
I don't know if she's trying. No, she's not.
No. We can take one more question and we try to get back when we have Bristol on the line. I think Peter Nora has a question here. Please stand up, Peter. Yeah, you do. We are online. You have to shout very high if this is going to be heard without the mic to Norway.
Andreas, you said that Spitsbergen was maybe a light at the end of the tunnel. Is this the classic example that it's a train coming against you?
Should I take that right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Svalbard, not Spitsbergen. I would correct you on that terminology. No, I didn't mention Svalbard necessarily as a light in the end of the tunnel, but as one of the areas where Norway has chosen to or has to continue collaboration with Russia, regardless of what has happened in Ukraine, because of the Svalbard Treaty, because there are 300, 400 Russian citizens living on the archipelago. Svalbard is a special case. I'm not sure I see that necessarily as the place where we can get back to normal, although Arne, who is the editor of the Svalbard newspaper, main one for several years, could probably talk about the collaboration between the East and the West, also during the Cold War. I do think that there are other arenas, perhaps. I mean, and now we're thinking in long term into the future when hopefully there is peace and maybe a new regime in Kremlin, or maybe something else at least. And we will need at some point to restart some forms of collaboration. And then issues like joint resource management, education, research on lower levels are, I believe, the venues to use. Svalbard, maybe not so much, but it's one of those places where Norway has to collaborate with Russia, regardless of the international situation.
Thank you, Andreas. It's also one of the places where the head of the NATO military committee, during his speech in Reykjavik, said that there was one of the places where there was the most increased Russian military activity was in the ocean around Svalbard. That's not good news. Any more question? We still miss Priscilla, I think. Can you hear us? Oh, there you are.
I think I sorted it out. Yes, and apologies for that. And if I understood correctly, the question was how the EU can cooperate with Arctic actors to push forward the green transition. So on this, I'm very happy to say that research and innovation is a very important part of the EU policy. And, we have these 7-year periods of our budget. And over the past 7 years, we invested some 350 million euros in Arctic research, and also hundreds of millions of euros in regional development. And this was very much part of this was to stimulate green businesses in the Arctic regions. And now we are in the new budget, and this commitment will continue in the years to come. So we want to use this EU money and expertise to stimulate a green transition, so that the Arctic regions can showcase these future compatible job creation in sectors, including green energy. And if there can be suitable approaches to connectivity, tourism, and innovation, and perhaps the Arctic can actually then provide the test bed for these new green energy technologies. So this would then benefit the Arctic environment, it would generate green growth, and it would be allowing technologies to be developed that can be exported elsewhere. So really we look forward to working with partners in the Arctic on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are actually ahead of schedule, but we started 15 minutes before we should. So I ask once more if there are any question. We can take one or two more before we think we need some fresh air. Okay. You need a mic over here. And if I don't see any hands during this speech, I will
to listen, which is your opinion about the role that science and science diplomacy could have in this period? We was talking a lot about the role and the use of the science as a way to push forward the cooperation. So which can be in this scenario very challenging, the role that we can play.
Any comments?
No, I very much agree with you. I think science diplomacy is, I mean, I'm no expert on science diplomacy, but obviously from other experiences that has been talked about, and we talked about track 2 diplomacy as well, there might be the possibility. I mean, the Arctic Council working groups are still continuing without the Russian participation, but maybe hopefully at some point you can have Russian scientists involved, at least, to deal with, as you highlighted before in your first question on climate change, those type of issues. I believe in people-to-people contact to get over those certain barriers of distrust. I don't think that's going to change the regime in Kreml, unfortunately, but it's a way to go. And I think as Frode Menlevik, the director of the High North Center, said in his opening speech as well, it's one of the points with the High North Center is to do that type of connections, the High North Dialogue, Arctic connections. I believe in those things, but I unfortunately, I'm more and more disillusioned between, on the one hand, those connections in the Arctic, which I think are having a purpose, and the regime in Kreml that seems to maybe not even act rational, according to others and Arne's words in terms of rationality. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Not much diplomacy to see these days. Hopefully, that means there's a lot of silent diplomacy going on somewhere. I want to thank Clara Gansland for joining us from Brussels. Thank you very much. I want to thank Aldo Pigoli. Thank you very much for welcoming us to your country and have this important discussion. And I want to thank Andreas Östhagen for meeting me in Rome. And thank you to the audience, both online and here at the university. Thank you very much.
I like your point. I didn't say it, but I would like your point about, I mean, although